Hello, welcome to the Gentle Rebel podcast, where I explore how to live a more meaningful life as a sensitive, creative type person without getting overwhelmed by all the noise, absurdity, hostility of our modern world. My name is Andy Mort. I'm a songwriter, performer, a massive introvert and a highly sensitive person. I love helping other gentle rebels find the courage and perspective required to make their own quiet stand for what truly matters in life to them. Welcome to episode number 279, where today I want to talk about positive thinking. One of our favourite things to do in our modern world is to create false dichotomies, strong, entrenched either-or thinking that kind of box us into one camp or another, or the other. Right now, I'm in the middle of qualifying as a personal performance and small business coach, and I took the plunge to this a couple of months ago. Really glad I did. It's already helping me focus better and gain clarity on how I can kind of take what I'm doing here on the podcast and also through the business and all the other kind of peripheral stuff that I'm doing, take it all to a deeper level so that I can kind of support and help more people in that kind of process of accepting who they are, uncovering their creativity and growing in the confidence that they need so that they can kind of design and practically build the life that they want to pursue. And one of the things I found really refreshing about doing this kind of double qualification, or I should say I found it more of a relief than refreshing. It's that the teaching is really quite solid. I feared that there would be a lot of kind of inane, platitudinal, positive thinking stuff that kind of sounds attractive but doesn't actually mean anything when you kind of drill down into it. Because around the kind of edges of the coaching world and a lot of the stuff that you see shared online that kind of comes under this big banner of life coaching, which is a term that I really struggle with even amidst all of this. Around in all that stuff, that you see the snappy messages in memes and things and in images that spread. There's a lot of inane fluff. Like I came across one recently that said something like positive thinking is not expecting the best to happen. It's about accepting that whatever happens is for the best. I first read that, I was like, yeah. And to the unalert mind, the unswitched on mind, you might kind of allow that to kind of seep in, and you're like, yeah, that's great. But as I took a moment to think about it, it's like, what does that even mean? It's like, and it's actually complete rubbish. You don't have to accept that whatever happens is for the best at all. Things happen all the time that are for the absolute worst, and there's nothing wrong with you kind of, grieving that and being like, actually, that's not for the best. That is for the worst. But it's something that I will come to accept and kind of move on regardless, or move on alongside, rumble with that. I guess the part which I find really hard is around human communication with these sorts of messages. Something I've learned through the coaching is this powerful idea that you never give advice to somebody that you're in a coaching relationship with. You never say, like, this is what you need to think, or this is what you need to believe. You never feed them ideas. You kind of help them identify and develop the stuff that's already inside them. You go by their agenda. You go by what's driving them, what it is that they want their life to look like, and the transformation they want to see. And this kind of philosophy resonates very well with me. The nonsense of saying stuff like, well, everything happens for a reason, can be really damaging, because it's kind of a barrier to grief. It's a barrier to healthy anger and to things that are actually going to help us move on down the line in healthier ways. How much do we all hate to be told stuff like that in the face of a bad situation? Someone on the outside or someone alongside you saying, like, don't worry, good comes out of even the worst things. You can't see it now, but in time this will make sense. Have you ever had that said to you? Maybe you've said it. We've probably all said stuff like that to people when we can't think of the right thing to say. Someone's going through tough times. You come out with those sorts of little platitudes that kind of have this facade of positive thinking, but it's not positive thinking. It's barrier thinking. It's fear thinking. It's denial thinking. It's protective thinking. It's an attempt to kind of stem the flow of discomfort in that moment before it comes crashing through like a tidal wave. But that build-up of water doesn't disappear just because you build a dam further up the river to stop the tidal wave from coming for a little while. Eventually that dam is going to burst, and the problems are going to be even worse than they would have because the reason that the dam has burst is because the pressure from the build-up of even more and more and more water has got to the point where it just can't hold anymore. In some ways, it's taking the heart of a philosophy like Stoicism and missing the point. You know, the idea that we can choose our response to anything that happens. The thoughts are only negative or positive based on the judgment you ascribe to them. But the fundamental part that's missing is the acceptance of what is. The sense that reality is what you make it is true to some degree. You know, there are all kinds of limiting beliefs that we carry, which mean that we can self-sabotage from doing what we might otherwise really want to do. And therefore, if we kind of begin to understand where those beliefs are speaking to us, we can start to tell ourselves a different story and change the kind of trajectory we're on. But this takes a lot of deep work, and it can't be achieved by a little kind of semantic twist in what we say or how we talk to ourselves. And it certainly can't be achieved by telling ourselves, just think positively. I was reminded of a bit in an old Louis Theroux program from his Weird Weekends series about self-fulfillment. And one of my favorite episodes is this one on self-fulfillment because it's got a sense of it's one of those things you can't stop watching, but you're like, this can't be real. And it's following some motivational speakers and hypnotists in I think it's in Las Vegas, who were kind of big on the self-help scene in different areas. There's like relationships, there's kind of money, just general motivational stuff. And there's this one guy, what's his name? I can't remember his name. And he sort of runs this millionaire mentor program. It's right on the tip of my tongue. I can't remember. Anyway, that's so frustrating. And it's this kind of sort of self-fulfillment conference thing. This bloke sort of says, his goal is to turn like thousands of people into millionaires, focused on making loads of money. And so there's Louis sort of meets this aspiring millionaire who it turns out has never actually met another millionaire. Marshall Silver, that's it. And yeah, it kind of transpires that when Louis is asking him, like, have you ever actually met anyone who's succeeded on this program, or their life has kind of changed in the way that he's promising it will? And there's a lot of quietness and all that sort of stuff. But in a part of their interaction, he introduces this concept to Louis, which is kind of taught, I think, as part of Marshall Silver's philosophy, which is to stop using the word problem, to stop saying, if someone asks something of you, like where you'd normally say, oh yeah, no problem. And instead you say, no challenge. Earlier when we were upstairs, I said something and you said, oh, no challenge. Mm-hmm. And in a way that I thought you wanted to say no problem.
I don't want to say no problem.
Why people normally say no problem. They don't normally say no challenge.
We don't say problem because nobody likes problems. We don't want to deal with problems. Yet we'll run to and take hand and go full force and challenge and make it work. That's what you tell yourself. It's a little personal development.
If you always say, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Then would you always be happy?
More than if you're not. Now let's say I'm under the weather.
Yeah, what if you feel like
I'm
really
having a rotten
shitty
day, everything's just not working right?
Yeah.
Say how you feel.
How do you feel?
Challenging, but getting better all the time.
What about if you had just discovered that you'd got cancer? How are you doing?
Awesome. because that's where I want to be.
What about if you've just been knocked over by a car, right, and you're on the gurney, and you're bleeding profusely and you've probably lost several limbs?
Uh-huh.
How are you doing?
Awesome. I'm alive. I'm breathing. I'm alive. I'm doing awesome. Reality is what you make it. What do you choose to be?
Awesome.
Guaranteed. Whenever you've personally totally committed and saying, this is what I want to do, it just got done, didn't it?
What if you change your mind?
You change your commitment, don't you?
My problem is I change my commitments all the
Well,
time.
you want a problem in life, you want a challenge.
That's my challenge. What do you want to be then?
I'm the wolf that's outside the pen. That's life. See, the sheep are all penned up. And when one sheep goes left, they all go left. Well, that's the masses. Now, the wolves have all the freedom. They got the entire woods. They got the entire everything out there. They come in and play when they want and leave when they want. They have all the freedom.
But the wolves eat the sheep, don't they?
They come and choose when they want to.
Yeah, they come and actually kill and eat the sheep.
Sometimes we are taught to think positively by the people who don't want us to see the reality of what they're doing around us, or maybe using us for in terms of their own agenda or their own ends. In these situations, it can be used to manipulate people into essentially buying more products. You know, if you're still failing at whatever it is that you want to be doing, it's because you're not thinking right. How can you think right? Well, you know, I've got a $5,000 course that teaches it. So, you know, if you do that, take that course, then I guarantee you'll be, if you're not there, then you'll be much further down the line. And so these carrots keep dangling because the non-positive thoughts are always there. The natural, authentic thoughts that are within all of us, the doubts, the fears, the anxieties. These are not negative or bad thoughts. In fact, there's no such thing as a negative thought. They're communication to us. Our thoughts are communication between our unconscious and our conscious minds, a message. And if we choose to beat them down or pretend they're not there, then we're going to be in trouble. In this sense, I guess there are two sides to this topic. There's the inner work, which we can do ourselves to address our limiting beliefs and turn them into more encouraging and more empowering ideas for our lives. And then there's the outer awareness of falling prey to these ideas that someone can cure all of your misfortune by enrolling you in their program or their course or their conference. And with the caveat that if you happen to fail, it's because you're still holding yourself back. This is a really genius but dangerous trap that we see so many people fall into. Success, happiness, being a millionaire, these things are just around the corner. You're always nearly there. There's a part of me that says this stuff and thinks like, oh, Andy, you're such a cynic. Why do you always have to overthink these things and pick everything apart? I definitely do see a lot of this stuff through a lens of judgment and skepticism. Though I think, you know, healthy judgment and skepticism, especially as I've gone through life, it has become healthier and less cynical. But doing the coaching courses has also felt like a vindication of this, weirdly. And I feel that it's even more necessary to wade through the BS and to pick it all apart, because I know from my own experience that coaching is powerful and when done right can be massively helpful, massively life-changing. And it has absolutely nothing to do with these kind of external measures of success. It's all about identifying and pursuing our own individual measures of success for different areas of life, whether it's being, you know, a more present parent with our kids, being healthier in our day-to-day lifestyles, or relinquishing our workaholism or obsession with needing to make more money so that we can make more time and more space for the things that actually matter most, like our closest relationships, our creative pursuits, and our self-care. These books about, you know, mindless productivity or get rich quick, think yourself thin, wealthy, popular, you know, all these things that are lumped into this same overall category of self-development or whatever, they're generally focused on doing and being more or specific ideals of what we should be aiming for. You know, if you want to look successful, if you want to appear like you've got life sussed, then these are the things that you need to be aiming for. And it shouldn't detract from the potential transformation that comes from giving ourselves permission to take our own personal growth seriously and to actually go after the things that matter most to us, which might be the complete opposite of those messages that we're receiving from that industry, from that way of thinking. And what I love about the work that I've been doing is untangling the messages and getting beneath the voices that speak to our aspirations. You know, you feel like you want to be a millionaire. Okay, well, let's get into where that message is coming from. What's the goal within the goal? You know, we might work out that actually that's not what you want at all. Perhaps you actually just want to do something more meaningful, something that you can feel proud of, something that actually matters to you. Or that you're hanging out with some really toxic people whose values don't align with yours. You think you need to be a millionaire in order to fit with the group, but they're not even a group that you want to fit in with. They're not your people at all, and they're not giving any value to your life. But you're stuck in this kind of this cycle of thought that if I only had that, then I would feel better because I would fit. But it's actually something you don't want to fit into anyway. My friend Josie George tweeted this week, "I cannot believe that in the year of our Lord 2019, I've seen a tweet saying people tweeting angrily about Game of Thrones should stop and care more about abortion rights. Holy moly, there does seem to be a whole subset of humanity still convinced that people can only care about one thing at a time, and that if you're not tweeting about it, you're obviously absolutely fine with it happening." You might be wondering what this has to do with the topic of positive thinking, and I shall answer. I think it has everything to do with positive thinking, or at least shines a huge light on how we think about thinking, how effective we are at holding ourselves in different places at the same time. I replied to Josie's tweet in agreement to say, oh yeah, when we deny ourselves and one another the ability to traverse the liminal divides and to occupy multiple spaces, it really troubles me. Unhealthy, simplistic silliness. You know, we hear this kind of thinking all the time, where you're either this thing or you're that thing. There's no in between. You can't be someone who cares about, you know, the stability of a community whose entire infrastructure has been built around the coal industry, while also caring wholeheartedly about the environment and about, you know, about changing stuff for the better so that climate to alleviate climate change. If you support one, then you hate the other. You know, they're mutually exclusive. But that kind of thinking gets us nowhere. In fact, it completely polarizes and entrenches each stereotype. Like on the roads, you know, the raging between cars and bikes, the driver frustrated with the cyclist furious with the driver. But, you know, many are both, and they forget, and we forget. Many people, you know, the cyclist is going to hop in a car later and start driving and get annoyed with cyclists. It's a whole weird thing of humanity. And so the concept of liminality is really important to invite into our thinking. This idea that we can be multiple things. We can hold multiple opinions at the same time. We can have multiple identities, sit in multiple kind of boxes in terms of what we do, what we, you know, our opinions and our like things that we enjoy doing, and believe in ways that fit us, not that fit the prescribed identity of a particular label. You know, you can be an extrovert and a highly sensitive person. You can be an introvert who loves to speak in public. You can be an extrovert who doesn't like being the center of attention, and so on. And you can care about a whole plethora of things. Game of Thrones and abortion rights, to use Josie's example. This simplistic complaint is a display of cynicism. It's lazy, it's highly judgmental, and highly damaging to the cause you profess to care about. It's like Bill Hicks when he pulls out a cigarette after kind of lulling the non-smokers in the room during one of his comedy gigs into kind of cheering really loudly and whooping and all that sort of stuff. When he asks, you know, how many non-smokers have we got here tonight? And at that point, he pulls out a cigarette packet, lights up a cigarette, and says, "I'd quit smoking if I didn't think I'd become one of you." You know, how often do we have that response to people who say that we should or shouldn't do something? How many times have you had an intention or a desire to do something? You're even about to do it, and then someone comes along and says, "Oh, you know, what you should do is this thing," and you're about to do it, and you decide, "Oh, I can't do it now because they're going to take credit for it." Is that just me who pulls out of doing stuff because someone like that comes along? There's something about the way certain people will think they can advise and direct you, like they're enlightened, they know best, they can show you a better way. Something about that is kind of repellent. Like literally, it repels you in the other direction. You know, you come into contact with it, and it's like boom, bounce. You kind of bounce off and go in the other direction. Or you say, "Yeah, I know, I was just about to do that." But you know they're going to still take credit because it seems like you're just saying that you were just about to do that. It sounds like, yeah, you know, they'll be like, "You're only doing it now because I've told you to do it." Or you do it anyway and try to do it without them seeing because you don't want them to think, you don't want them taking any ownership of it. And you really, really hope that they don't see you doing the thing that they've suggested you do, even though you were already going to do it. I guess we've probably done a mixture of that stuff. But the response that is rarest is gratitude. You know, "Oh, thanks so much for pointing out that smoking's really bad for me. I hadn't realised until you'd come and told me. I'll probably quit now you've mentioned that." You know, on the whole, people don't need to be told what to do. We don't need advice. We kind of already know what we need to do, and we find it when we want it. You know, if we want to learn how to do something, we will seek out those voices that can help us, that can mentor us. And we need to be able to hold different positions at the same time. You know, I'm passionate about Game of Thrones and women's rights, for example. I love football and I really, really love art. I care deeply about climate issues and my community, which would collapse if the coal or oil was suddenly taken away overnight. This is something I talked with Laurie Helgo about last week in an interview, which is going to be going out in the Haven soon, about narcissism and kind of related topics. I'll post the interview in a podcast in a few weeks or so as well. A really, really interesting topic of discussion about how we can live with freedom to be, to think, and to hold multiple positions. And how we can, you know, hold those things in balance and actually, you know, put one another first and then create a better world as a result of that. So how does this relate to positive thinking? Good question. And I'm trying to remember. To go back to the sense of positive thinking being a prescribed set of beliefs, thoughts, or words. So this sense that if you want to be successful, then you need to think a certain way, you need to act a certain way, you need to speak a certain way. And if you entertain any negative thoughts, then you are pretty much responsible yourself for your own failure. Also, as I've mentioned within the coaching world, for me, a huge thing is being able to use the amazing things I'm learning, but to decipher between what I think are helpful and enriching lessons and the stuff which I don't think is going to be particularly helpful or even healthy. It's an ongoing battle in my mind around labels. Like this podcast, I think this podcast comes under the category of self-help on iTunes. Now that puts it alongside many podcasts with content that I find questionable, things that I in fact vehemently oppose. And it was kind of one of those things where I really have to put it in self-help. But as I thought about it, it's like, well, this stuff kind of is self-help, isn't it? It is that kind of self-development and that general umbrella of you know, self-growth. There's no point throwing the baby out with the bathwater by either pretending that this goes in another category and then just sort of finding completely the wrong audience, or at the extreme end, kind of jacking the whole thing in because I don't want to be associated with other things that occupy the same category. That would be really stupid. So positive thinking. Well, what does positive thinking actually mean to me? It's obviously a really broad idea. It's a category that encompasses so many things. So I just want to kind of look at how we can develop a healthy relationship with this idea of positive thinking that doesn't leave us disconnected to our actual real thinking, our actual real feelings. Because once again, that's what we're talking about here. Allowing ourselves to accept and to embrace the truth of where we're at, whilst at the same time maintaining a space for the potential for where we can go. The right kind of positive thinking is steeped in this acceptance. It's the voice that allows the initial impression of something to breathe. Say it's a disappointment or a crisis that's really, really crap. No two ways about it. Like, things are really, really rubbish. Stuff's been turned completely upside down. Life suddenly feels chaotic and confusing, and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to go on with this. It's absolutely rubbish. A healthy mindset allows the truth of that to sit there, to rumble, to grieve the change, the loss. None of this is negative thought. It's real, it's authentic, and it's necessary. And then in time, as your brain begins to kind of come to terms with the plot twist, so to speak, you can begin to ask yourself, okay, how do I want to respond to this? How am I going to move forwards in the most kind of authentic and integrity-filled way, in aligning with my own values and the person that I want to be? How can I take back control of what can be controlled and choose my next steps? Not to say, oh, I'm so glad this has happened because it means I can, do this or that. That's kind of this inane positive thinking that's not real. It's not helpful. We're not talking about negative or positive thought. We're talking about finding agency and choice and using that to decide how we're going to respond. And when we accept that kind of permission to choose our response, we're likely to feel more empowered to make better choices rather than simply allowing ourselves to kind of spiral down those natural paths of least resistance. So traditional ideas of positive thinking might suggest that by thinking positively and saying, I'm going to get this job before going for a job interview, and to repeat this because, by saying it, you make it true. Real thinking is to say, I'm going to do everything within my power to prepare myself so I've got the best chance that I can give myself for getting this job, because I really, really want it. I really want this job. And then if you don't get the job, real thinking is, man, I'm really disappointed that I didn't get that job. I would have loved to have had it. And to rumble with that feeling, and then to say, well, what have I learned about myself as a result of this? What have I learned from this experience? To accept what is, and then to go again. To not say that kind of not getting the job defines me in any way. But if we take the I am going to get this job approach, we actually close the door to learning and open the door to shame, because the implication is, I'm a bad person because I deserve that job. I should have it. The universe is on my side, and I'm going to, the fact that you don't get it means maybe the universe is not on my side. I'm a failure, and there's nothing I can do to change that. The question that we must always be ready to answer is, how ready are we for when things don't go to plan? And this is not in the sense of, we're not talking about preparing for the worst and expecting the worst. It's not this kind of negative thinking. It's healthy thinking, because it prepares us to rise higher when we fail. And we will fail. If we're doing anything of value, if we're doing anything with our lives, then we're going to experience struggles, setbacks, and failures. That's inevitable. Do we allow them to floor us? Do they take us down? Do we struggle to find the motivation to get up and go again? Have we attached so much significance to success that we lose a part of ourselves if we don't achieve it? Or are we ready to feel the disappointment, to acknowledge it, but then to accept it before we move forwards and choose, this is how I'm going to respond. This is what this is making possible. One empowering thought that I like to carry with me is that, no matter what happens, I have the ability to develop clarity around what I can do next. I might not gain clarity immediately, but it will come. Positive thinking can also actually be more draining than negative thinking or reality thinking. It might sound backwards, but forcing positive thoughts takes energy and emotion and can actually leave us in an even lower state than before. And it also has the added aspect of shame when you reach the point where you can't maintain these positive thoughts. These I've got to say these things that are positive, because if I say them, then they're true. If they start to not be true, and you start to allow not so positive thoughts to creep in, then you feel kind of shame about it. You're not good enough to be that, to be a success in the eyes of that kind of school of positive thinking. If you're constantly consciously trying to eliminate thoughts that you construe as negative and to think happy or positive thoughts instead, you're engaged in this mental battle with yourself. You're fighting your own unconscious mind. And there's only one winner in that situation. Hint, it's not your conscious mind. Your conscious mind gets tired and hungry and confused very easily. Your unconscious mind eats tiredness and hunger and confusion for breakfast and feeds you an incredible voice that will bring it down even further. It also follows that the positive thoughts we feel that we need to develop the most stem from the hardest and most entrenched limiting beliefs. So it becomes even more draining and failing when we can't think our way to a solution. Otherwise, we wouldn't even feel the need to think positively, would we? We'd just do it. For example, if self-doubt is a problem and I don't believe I'm going to get the job that I'm going for, telling myself that I'm confident and I am going to get it isn't going to make any difference. This idea of, come on, think positively, it doesn't do anything other than develop this kind of internal lie, this chasm within yourself of what you're saying and what you're actually believing. Just because you say it doesn't mean you believe it, and certainly doesn't make it true. Whereas if you acknowledge the doubt and you get into kind of where that doubt is coming from, what message is that sort of communicating, you can start to find a more appropriate message to bring in. I find it hard to believe that I can do this, but I'm able to learn how to get to the next best step. And I can learn how to do this. And you can identify specific actions that will keep you moving in the right direction, even though the overall, the big picture feels impossible. Positive psychology is about growing deep roots. It's not simply kind of fake it till you make it, surface level perception psychology stuff. And this leaves plenty of space to embrace and to work through the murky stuff as well. How much is the positive thinking self-help world focused on fleeting and meaningless external stuff like money, the Millionaire Mentor program, success, be the success that you deserve to be, and fame, and all these kind of ideas around appearance and how you're perceived by other people. And it's no wonder, because it's a message that we see everywhere. On TV, through advertising, the conversations we have with one another. Everything's about being bigger and having more numbers and, looking like you're a massive success, famous and wealthy and all of these kinds of things, and beautiful. We live these different levels of reality where on the one hand, we all kind of believe that certain things are important because they show the kind of person we are and the level we're living at. But on the other hand, we find this desperately meaningless and empty and alien from our kind of inner, authentic, rational views of what true success actually looks like, the things that we actually value about our relationships with one another and about other people, the things we respect in other people. We also know that the stories about happiness being linked to wealth and fame, they're kind of discredited by almost every piece of research about human flourishing and happiness. We know that beyond a certain level of income, there's no correlation between happiness and money. And we know that from all kinds of sources that fame and unending growth doesn't equate to satisfaction or happiness. In fact, it does the opposite. This kind of pursuit, this endless pursuit of more takes place. So why have we become so obsessed with these measures of happiness and success when we kind of know that they're not real? I mean, they're easy to manipulate They're easy to sell to. They keep people feeling unworthy, like they're not good enough. So constantly striving to be different, to get somewhere else. And it plays on the gap between where we are and where we should be, in inverted commas. If we come to value where we are more, then things would kind of grind to a halt. And that the kind of whole the system that we're in requires things to keep moving. Because the problem is, if we were to experience true happiness, our lifestyles would change dramatically. If we began to understand that we won't find contentment if we, buy stuff or pursue certain ideals of success, there's going to be a lot of people out of business. Like with the example in Louis Theroux's documentary, it was the perfect spider's web. If someone wasn't succeeding, it was because they hadn't brought enough products. They hadn't broken through with themselves yet. It was a blocker inside them, something holding them back from giving themselves fully to the system or the program, which held the key to their success. And given the link with hypnosis in all of that, it was actually rather terrifying as a line of thought. But in reality, it's because the bar for success is meaningless and empty. When it's all about money, it's not about meaning. The program to make, 1,000 multimillionaires or whatever, doing what? What value are they contributing to the world in order to make that money? What does that money represent in terms of real world value? When you're focused on the income as the outcome, you lose sight of the meaty middle, the stuff that makes it worth it. The stuff that actually contributes to the value to the world. But this is attractive. It's really attractive. We're drawn to those things. All our problems could be solved if we had more money. So, we could pay our debts. We could quit our jobs. We could live the life that we dream of. Money is the answer to that, not meaning. And that's the hook. The hook is that sense of your perceived struggles being alleviated. But what if the things that we think are the struggles are not actually the struggles? Because those deeper thoughts, that deeper sense of, lacking meaning, lacking purpose, those fears, those struggles, anxieties, all of those things are still going to be there. I was drawn to coaching because it's not like that. It's about identifying values, goals, and limiting beliefs, uncovering a holistic sense of what you actually want life to look like, what you actually value in yourself, in other people, in the world, in your pursuits. And it's about taking action to begin building a life that actually rejects all the stories and the messages that we've been told to believe, and to begin designing and kind of building life upon our actual values, the stories we actually want to tell ourselves, the person that we actually want to be, the story that we want to tell the world and leave with the world instead. How do you feel about all this stuff? It's a bit of a messy minefield, but I'd absolutely love to hear your thoughts on this topic. It's been an ongoing challenge for me over the years to kind of reconcile and balance out how I approach all these things. I've always been massively drawn into this self-development and personal growth stuff. There's been a big skeptical voice, as I mentioned earlier, on my shoulder, kind of warning me about it as well. Some of that is certainly limiting belief. Some of it is valid concern about some of the ideas and the people and the movements within this sphere. But it sure does make for a confusing time in my head. That's why I wanted to kind of underpin what I've discussed in this show with Josie's tweet as well, about occupying the liminal spaces of life. Feeling okay about having our feet in different camps at the same time. That's where I am. It's where I've often been in many of my pursuits, feeling on, I suppose, the outside of different identities, different groups, thinking, I want to be a bit of that and a bit of that. In many people's eyes, you can't be both of those things, but, I want to be, and that's what feels natural. And so it's this thing of like, you never quite fit in, but being okay with that. And it's all good, because we don't want to fit in. We shouldn't want to fit in, because none of us do fit in. And if we do fit in, then we're kind of, as we've discussed in recent episodes, we're kind of rejecting our own sense of belonging to ourselves. We all belong to a plethora of different identities, groups, and ideas. No one gets to pigeonhole us in a way that leaves us adopting the judgment and pigeonholing ourselves. So Thank you so much for listening to this today. I hope it's made sense. I hope you've got some value from it. I'd love to ask you a big favour before we go. The best thing that you can do to support the podcast, other than becoming a patron through Patreon, which I haven't actually mentioned in this show today, is to rate and comment on the show in your chosen podcast application, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Google Play or wherever you're listening to this, basically. If you could just take a minute to search for the Gentle Rebel podcast there and leave a quick rating and comment there, it'd be amazing. Just helps to get the show and previous episodes of it into more of the ears of people searching for help and support with the topics that we're exploring each week here. I'd be really grateful if you do that. Also, Patreon, that's the really the number one way to support the podcast, because you can do so financially. You can help keep it running, basically, and in response, or in return, should I say, you get different rewards based on the pledge that you give. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get episodes early. You'll get your name read in an episode, future episode, and you'll get my eternal gratitude. So go to andymort.com/Patreon, Patreon, to find out more about how you can do that and earn my affections that way. Be great. Okay, I'll be back again next time with another episode of the Gentle Rebel podcast. Until then, do remember that you're an artist, that the world needs your art. Now go and make somebody's day. Goodbye.
Can all be angels in disguise.